Activate Your Introvert, our podcast by me, John Baker, for intrapreneurs and business leaders tackling the 33% productivity gap due to ignorance of introversion. To help you unlock more productivity and creativity so you get a better business. In this week's podcast, how meeting leaders and trainers and speakers often discard a third of their audience and what to do about it. I'm interviewing Susan Armstrong, a speaker and international talent development expert. And if you would like to talk to me about any of the issues raised in this week's podcast, there's more details at introvertinbusiness.co.uk. And maybe you'd like me to speak at your conference or work with your team to unlock productivity. I'd love to talk to you. Contact details are on the website. Welcome, Susan. Would you like to introduce yourself before we get going?
Yes, thank you, John. It's so nice to be here. So, international talent development expert, I think that confuses people. Speaker, people are probably very familiar with. International talent development expert is a fancy way of saying that I design and then deliver workshops and training seminars around the world.
That's brilliant, thank you. Now, I've had a thing for a long time that when leaders are running meetings, they dismiss, without even realizing it, a third of the people in the room, because the way they act tends to squash down the introverts. And I know we started a conversation about training and meetings as well, because there's a lot of similarities. So what is it that trainers do to lose a third of their audience?
Well, it's true what you say. So two things I want to call out. First of all, it is a third, if not more, John. In some disciplines, you're going to have more than a third of your audience who are introverts. And the other thing you said that I think it's important we highlight is that they do it unconsciously. So it's not a conscious thing. And I think that's really important to get out there. It's not like people do this on purpose. But a lot of, certainly the way it's gone over the last 5-7 years, a lot of trainers, a lot of speakers, they're all about the rah. It's that kind of American style motivation and let's get up in our seats and, we have to yell out. And it just makes me crazy when I get a trainer who's, well, let's all stand up and, touch each other and rub each other's backs, or a speaker who's saying, call out if you agree with me. I'm not an introvert, but that makes me crazy. And I think it doesn't just make the introverts crazy. I think it puts them off a bit.
Well,
it's a little intimidating and it shuts them down.
Yeah, certainly from my own perspective, I know how I feel about it. And normally when somebody does that kind of thing in the room, I look around the room and I watch, as you say, the third, sometimes more, of people that a lot of them just don't respond at all and actually are being shut down, and you can see it in their faces. But then there's others that are kind of going through the motions physically, but you can see on their faces they're being really put off. So why is it that trainers, and I guess also people running meetings, feel this great urge to get people all motivated and excited or whatever? Why is it they do it?
Well, in meetings, as you would know, and it's the same in any kind of training session, what we want is engagement. So we want people to share ideas. We want them to share their opinions. We want them to get involved, because that's actually, well, from a meeting standpoint, that's where you get the best ideas, right? Through brainstorming. From a training standpoint, learning only happens through doing. So through people engaging and speaking. The problem is, and you said it earlier, that most leaders, most trainers are not aware of behavioral styles. So they're not aware. So we have this, I call it center of the universe. We have this center of the universe thing that as I am, so I expect everybody else to be. So if I'm outgoing and gregarious and enthusiastic, when someone is not, I think there must be something wrong with them. So if I'm a trainer and I'm outgoing and gregarious and enthusiastic, I'm going to create a training session where I expect participants to behave in the same way. And it's the same with meetings. If I'm that outgoing, action-oriented, direct kind of person, I'm asking the questions and expecting spontaneous answers because that's what I would give. But we don't consciously take into consideration the difference in communication or behavioral styles. So believe it or not, there's a full 50% of the population who would actually like to think about what they say before they speak it. And when we don't make allowances for that, so in training, when we don't create activities that are comfortable for people who would like to actually think about what they say before they say it, or they want to make sure it's the correct answer before they share. When we don't make room for those people, they're not engaged. They've checked out of the process and they don't want to participate.
So what should trainers do to get the engagement without, putting these people off?
Well, and I always call it, you don't want to put somebody on the spot, because that's what you're doing. If you ask an introvert for an answer in front of a group of 25 other people, or heaven forbid, 50 other people, or even 18 other people, you're going to immediately shut them down and turn them off because they're just not comfortable. So from a training perspective, you have to know your audience, and you do when you're speaking or even running a meeting. You have to know your audience. And we need to create activities that are comfortable for the audience. So your outgoing, extroverted, direct people are fine shouting out answers in front of a group, even if the answer is wrong. They don't care. But if you know you're working with a department or you've got participants who are likely to be more extroverted, you don't want to have those large group discussions. You want to break it up into partners or groups of 3 where they're comfortable actually discussing their ideas in a small group versus a large group. Does that make sense?
That makes a whole lot of sense, yeah. And I can absolutely see why that would work. Thank you.
So even in meetings, if I can add, even in meetings, one of the big mistakes we make is as leaders is we don't take our introverts into consideration, and we don't bother sharing the agenda or the objective of the meeting until the beginning of the meeting. That is the worst thing you can do with a group of extroverts.
No, I was having a long discussion on that with a couple of clients the other day. How about we flip this thing the other way around for a second? Because we're talking about how trainers are losing a third to half of their audience. Have you got any way that I, as an introvert and in a training session, are there things I could do to get more from it? Perhaps it's not being run by an enlightened trainer who's doing all the bad things that we were just talking about. Yeah. How would I get more from it?
Well, again, so that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. So first of all, I want to say that nobody does this on purpose. But you're right. It might be a trainer or a workshop leader who has never been trained to do this well. So they don't know that they should be reading their audience and adjusting activities. But I would suggest, and I've had it happen to me, and I respect this, I would suggest that the introvert on break or during an activity goes to the trainer to let them know that they're uncomfortable. So I'll give you an example. It was not too long ago, a month or so ago, I was doing an emotional intelligence workshop, emotional intelligence in the workplace. And through the agenda, I had mentioned that we would be doing some role play. Completely forgot, John, about the perception of role play for some people. And about an hour later, a young lady came up to me and she was clearly upset. And I said, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And she said, I can't do the role play. I just wanted to let you know. And I said, okay, that's fine. May I ask why? Like, what's happening? And she shared with me that the only time she had ever done role play, it was what we call fishbowl. So 2 people were forced to come to the room and role play while all 18 other people watched and provided feedback. Can you imagine?
Horrendous.
Absolutely. So when she shared that with me, I was horrified. First of all, that somebody would actually do that without, assessing the audience, that they would put them in that spot. And I said to her, my mistake. It's not that kind of role play. It's safe, with a partner about something that's personal to you. She said, oh, okay, I can do that, and was quite happy. But the point was she couldn't focus until she got that off her chest. So introverts, I would encourage you to go to the workshop leader during an activity or on a break and express your concern, because chances are they are not intentionally making you uncomfortable. They just really don't know.
That's a really good point that you put in there. And you said something about the introvert won't even be able to focus until they've got it out of their mind that they need to do something. And that's a really, really important point. Who owns the problem, Sue? The introvert or the trainer?
If you want an honest answer, John, the trainer owns the problem. But as you said, unfortunately, a lot of trainers aren't trained in learning styles or behavioral styles. So they're completely unaware that people would prefer different activities to what maybe they are planning on doing. So it's that center of the universe. They have trouble getting out of their own center of the universe. But a good trainer will read their audience and will create the activities for their audience. As an introvert, if they are not doing that, please go to them one-on-one and speak up, because anybody worth their salt will be able to adjust those activities.
And I think the important thing, as you said, there are some superb trainers who get this. There are also a number of business managers and leaders who, what I would call, occasionally train, and they are much less aware. And so that's really one of the things I wanted to pick up.
Well, like I said, if you've never been trained on learning styles or behavioral styles, you wouldn't be aware that different people view the world in a different way and are comfortable in different settings. You know, we assume everyone's like us.
So just changing the subject very slightly, I think you mentioned earlier you're not the typical introvert. In fact, you're probably at the other end of the scale.
Yes, I am.
So I ask all my guests for one tip, and in your case, perhaps that would be one tip for an introvert when perhaps conversing with an off-the-scale extrovert.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. Just make them aware. Make them aware. You know, whether it's raising your hand, whether it's looking at them directly in the eye, but somehow you've got to call their attention to the fact that they're doing all the talking. You see, the problem is an extrovert is uncomfortable with silence. So if I ask you a question, John, and heaven forbid you take a moment to think about it, I will naturally think that means you don't have an answer. So I will very helpfully give you the answer, you see, because I'm not aware that you actually need time to think. So the introvert needs to just call up a little bit of, courage to say, I'm just thinking about the answer, or may I have a few seconds to think? But they're not doing it on purpose, I think is the tip. So you've got to not take it personally and make them aware that you just need a little more time to think about it.
Thank you. So I'm sure that some of the people listening to this would love to get in touch with you afterwards. How should they do that?
You can go through the website. It's susanarmstronginternational.com, or you can email me directly at susan@susanarmstronginternational.com. But John, as you know, I'm always happy to help wherever I can.
No, absolutely. Suze, thank you so much for today. I think it's been really, really useful.